This week, what I've got for you is a book that covers an extensive number of submissions. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. The subject for today's review is Submission Fighting Techniques by Stephen S. Iverson, published in 2001. As far as the author goes, I can't find anything on this guy that isn't from the About the Author section. It sort of boggles my mind. I've even asked around a little bit, but from the About the Author section, sounds like he began martial arts in Taekwondo. Eventually his training began to include judo and perhaps traditional jiu-jitsu based on spelling, and that's about all we got. Now, also as a preface, this is the first edition of this book. There was a second edition that came out later. I'm actually going to be covering those as two separate books. The second edition was more of a no-holds-barred Vale Tudo style book. The focus was submissions, but there was also an ample amount of bare-knuckle striking. As far as the general format of this book, generally it will cover what submissions are available in various positions, and usually, but there are exceptions, we'll get to those, usually it begins at the neck and works its way down the body, from the arms, and eventually down to the legs. There's not really much as far as any preface. We really just jump into standing submissions. And again, we begin with neck locks, starting with neck cranks, moving into chokes. This is actually one of the exceptions because the author will show various leg locks from this position in the form of sacrifice throws. I say throws, but basically dropping into leg locks and catching the legs on the way down, things like rolling knee bars. He actually shows two variations of a rolling knee bar, one where your head rolls on the outside, the other where it rolls toward the opponent's body. And he finishes up with arm locks, again including some sacrifice techniques. Some of them are fully standing, like if somebody attacks you from behind, you're able to figure four and hyperextend their elbow joint. But also things like not really a flying arm bar, but more like a falling arm bar. Following that, we get 4 chapters covering submissions from and inside of both closed and open guard. We begin offensively from closed guard, moving on to offensively from open guard. Then what to do if you were caught inside someone's closed guard, and then inside somebody's open guard. A lot of the open guard submissions, whether you are the one utilizing open guard or whether you are defending yourself from your opponent's open guard attacks, tend to take the form of leg locks. For the closed guard attacks, and what's sort of going to become a trend, we begin, as we did with the standing work, with neck locks. And I don't just mean chokes, I mean neck cranks are included. The author will include a number of unconventional submissions, including neck cranks and elbow compressions, what some people would view as bicep slicers, although also not really in some cases. He's got a few, for instance, where he's just folding the wrist as hard as he can into the guy's shoulder without anything interrupting that mechanism. Following that is a brief chapter on submissions while both underneath and on top of the half guard. All of these submissions are leg locks. As a leg lock fan, I like that. Following that, we get to, again, a chapter on submissions both from a position, in this case mount, as well as from underneath mount. As one might expect, there's a variety of upper body submissions while one is mounted, including neck cranks, a number of chokes, and a number of armbar variations. From underneath mount, these all involve escape and reversal attempts that end in leg locks. Sticking with the theme of mount, he presents a chapter on submissions from what he refers to as modified mount, what we would recognize in a lot of circles as the gift wrap position. So the attacker has turned his opponent onto their side and has their top arm wrapped around their own neck. From there, he includes some chokes and neck locks, but primarily he's attacking arm locks, including some variations of the straight armbar. There's also a very brief chapter on submissions from reverse mount, where you're basically sitting on the guy's chest. These include a couple of arm locks as well as a leg submission. The next two chapters are going to be submissions from side control. The first chapter is from being on top of side control. The second chapter is submissions from underneath side control. Again, sticking with the theme, the first chapter includes a variety of submissions, beginning with neck cranks, moving on to chokes, bent arm locks, straight arm locks. These include locks on both the near and far arm, locks on the near and far leg, including several ankle cranks and knee bars. As far as submissions from the chapter on being stuck underneath mount, I do like that these were included here. Of course, when you are in a bad position, your first choice should be to improve your position and escape. But I do think that it's useful to perhaps have some submissions in your arsenal from bad positions, and I think this is a pretty solid chapter on that. The submissions from underneath side control are all upper body submissions in the form of chokes and arm locks. The next chapter is, again, sort of sticking with the idea of side control and variations of side control. We get a section on submissions from scarf hold. In other words, you're on top, you have your opponent's head and near arm trapped. Submissions while you are stuck underneath that position, and submissions where you are in a modified version, so instead of just the head and arm, you have the near arm, and you're going underneath the far arm. That's modified Keisagatame in a bunch of circles, or broken scarf hold. One thing that grinds my gears, as the expression goes, is his Keisa is lazy. What I mean by that is you do not have a good Keisagatame if your opponent's near shoulder is on the ground, because if it is, they can turn to face you. That is the variation that he's showing. If you are doing a good Keisagatame, you have your opponent's near shoulder shelved on your near thigh. This prevents him from turning into you, which means he can't get behind you, because if you don't have that shoulder under control, that's what's going to happen, and now you don't have him, he's got you. Unsurprisingly, these submissions, both from Keisa, stuck underneath Keisa, and modified Keisa, are, I think they're all upper body submissions. The next two chapters are again from top positions. We get from a position he refers to as knee on stomach, more common term is knee on belly these days. He also shows a variation of that knee on chest. So instead of having the knee go across the opponent's stomach, you're actually going more from the shoulder on down and applying pressure to the chest. These chapters have a number of submission options, mostly on the upper body, but we do get a knee bar variation, and the little catch wrestling nerd in me is happy to see that he actually shows a cradle from knee on belly as a submission. So basically you have your knee in the guy's diaphragm, and you scoop up his head and his knee, you try to make those things meet, and you turn the guy into a flattened out accordion with all your weight going into his diaphragm. That will eventually wear you out. It's not a fast submission. It might not even submit some people, but it'll make the guy miserable, and I like that because it's good long-term strategy. Following that is a series of attacks from the referee's position. In other words, the opponent is on their elbows and knees. This is often referred to these days as the turtle position. What's interesting here, he sort of like works around the body. This includes from like a front headlock position where he actually applies a version of the anaconda choke. He has what I would call a proto-darce choke. In other words, he has the hand position for the beginning of a darce choke, and instead of reaching on through, he's just sort of scissoring his arms in order to apply pressure to the neck. This also includes a number of submissions where the knees are bent, and also includes attacks to the ankles. This again has sort of a catch wrestling flavor to it. We then follow that up with a chapter on submissions from the rear mount. Some of these are going to be your classic submissions, like a rear naked choke, or even a full Nelson, or going for an armbar when you have the opportunity to slide the guy off to the side. There are also some rather elaborate and unconventional submissions, including some submissions where you throw your legs under the guy's shoulders and into the back of his head. This chapter ends with showing some submissions if the guy has rear mount on you. These are entirely variations of ankle locks. We then get a chapter on submissions from the north-south position. This actually includes a north-south choke, and being 2001, that would be a very unconventional choke at the time. He doesn't refer to it as that. He refers to it as a shoulder choke, and it could use some refinement, but it is pretty much a north-south choke. Also included in this chapter, he does show some submissions from the bottom of north-south, just a couple, I think an arm lock and a choke with the shin. Then there's a final chapter that shows variations and follow-ups to certain submissions, including the triangle choke, the Jujigatame style arm bar, the knee bar, and various foot locks. And by foot locks, I mean the foot is what's being held, but we're talking everything from Achilles locks to ankle cranks to heel hooks. You'll get things in this, for example, if you have an opponent in a triangle choke, you can begin to manipulate his free arm, or you can begin to go for neck cranks while you got his head under control. If you have him in a Jujigatame position and the opponent tries to block you from straightening out his arm, he shows some ways of countering that. And finally, the book wraps up with an index, which is a pretty good way to go back and look for specific submissions from specific positions. I should also note that before they really get into the submissions, in a lot of the chapters, we do get a brief but basic overview of the position itself. As far as the pros go, I think the book was incredibly well organized. There would be some minor changes I would make in regards to, why did we go from standing to being on the bottom? But by and large, I think, again, organized pretty well. And it was mostly consistent with, each chapter beginning with neck submissions, moving on to arm submissions, and following on to leg submissions. I also appreciate how it has a number of unconventional submissions. I think that some of these are going to be a higher percentage than others, but I think if you're in the submission game, this might give you some ideas for, what can I do from here? Oh, I didn't think about using this submission from here before. Also highlight one more time that bottom side control submission chapter. Again, it's sort of risky to try to go for submissions when you're in a bad position as opposed to trying to escape that position. But I would say with side control in particular, it does sometimes open up some opportunities for that. As far as the cons go, several times in this I would describe the submissions as being primitive or unrefined. For instance, in the referee's position chapter, he has, again, what's basically an anaconda choke, but it relies more on squeezing instead of the position of the body in order to get the submission. The leg locks in particular sort of drove me crazy because he doesn't really have good control over the guy's leg in several cases. For instance, we see here he's going for a straight ankle lock, and the entire way he has to secure that leg is to sort of pinch his knees around it. And anyone with a few months of decent grappling training is not going to fall for that. And similarly, again, the scarf hold position wasn't really shown in an optimal way. So overall, again, the issue is more with refinement of the techniques. Alright, as far as recommendations go, if you can find this book, again, it came out in 2001. I don't know if it's still in print. I would highly doubt it. And it probably got replaced by the second edition. But I think insofar as giving one ideas for, again, unconventional submissions or rarer submissions from all these various positions, I think it's good for that, more like as an inspiration, you know, as opposed to necessarily an instructive text. I think that if one has more modern grappling training, more submission grappling training, one can easily take a look at how some of these submissions are done here and go like, okay, this is giving me an idea about how to do that, but I know how to do it mechanically better. So it's not a bad resource. I just think that many instructionals have come out in the last 10 or 15 years that have a better eye toward more mechanically advantageous ways of performing these specific subs. That's all I have for this week, guys. I appreciate you following along with me. If you like what I do, please leave a like. Feel free to subscribe if you like me doing book reviews. This is part of the first themed thing that I've ever done. This is the Summer of Sport. So this is a sport-oriented thing. I'm focusing on the competitive side of martial arts until the end of September. If you'd like to help support the channel, or if you'd like to request a video, I am taking requests through my Ko-fi account. You can also donate to that to, again, support the channel. Once again, thank you for following along, and I'll talk to you later.